Best Book Bits podcast brings you Joel Primus, father, husband, entrepreneur, mediocre meditator, wannabe farmer, tag-along hunter, first-time filmmaker, former athlete, hopeful writer, and dedicated wanderer. Joe, thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure, Michael. Good to be here with you today.
No worries. Now, did I miss anything in that little intro?
No, no, I think that the boat covers me.
No problem. So first off, I just want to say congratulations. You've had your third child. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah. No, we had a baby at home on the farm. My wife is like 90 pounds. So she gave pound to a 9-pound baby. So just a remarkable feat on her part at home in the bathtub. So we're
wow.
Proud and tired parents right now.
Yeah, definitely. And that's your third child. Is that correct? Yep.
Yeah. You got 2, right, mate?
Yeah, I got 2. Yep, I got 2. So I know what it feels like. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. But what I want to do for my audience that don't know who you are, you've done quite a lot in your career, and we'll get through that as well. But yeah, take us back to the teenage Joel. What were you dreaming of becoming while you were a teenager, and where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. Familiar with the area? Have you been to Vancouver before, Michael?
No, I haven't. No, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, not Canada yet.
Yeah, I haven't been to Canada yet. Vancouver's I mean, the joke is that all the Aussies come to Canada for the snow and they never leave. There's a town called Whistler and it's just packed with Australians. So I grew up a little bit away from that. The good life, as I say, getting dirty, walking to school at 5 years old and not coming home until the dinner bell rang, so to speak. But, that was my youth. And then I got real bloody serious when I became a teenager and I realized that I was good at running. And I became incredibly singular focused, that everything dropped out of way. The pursuit of girls, partying, all those things that I wanted, like the natural stuff that we want as young peoples growing up into our bodies and into adulthood. I just pushed it all aside and said, the only thing that's going to happen is I'm going to be a runner and I'm going to represent Canada in the Olympics. And I got pretty far in that journey. I ended up representing Canada at the World Championships, ended up on a full ride athletic scholarship. But then I blew up my Achilles, and eventually all of that came crashing down and I had to rediscover myself outside of running. I may be too far ahead, Michael, but that's really the gist of it. I was a boring kid. I just wanted to run fast and far and beat people.
No, that's understand. Yeah, I hate running, by the way, but that's okay. It's not for everyone. Talk us about sort of after you did the injury, you took some odd jobs, bartending, landscaping, and travels. Is that correct? And where did you go on your travels when you finished up with school?
There's this you've probably felt it. I mentioned all the Aussies coming over here, and I think that there's this rite of passage where young people trying to find themselves need to kind of escape, and they think that the answers are all elsewhere. They're all out there floating around in the world, and there's a lot to be learned, but all of that stuff just teaches you that the answers were inside of you. And so I became this kind of free-flowing vagabond where because I couldn't stand, mate, I could not stand when people would ask me, how's the running? Because I wasn't running anymore after I'd blown up my Achilles and eventually I lost my scholarship and I lost my place on Canada's world team. I had so much insecurity around it that I couldn't face it. So part of going away was I needed to escape that so that I could have a moment to just not have to answer those questions and lie, because I would lie. I'm not proud of it, but I would literally just say it's fine. I wouldn't say I'm not a runner anymore. So I ended up hitchhiking across the country. I couldn't afford anything. So I walked out my front door, stuck out my thumb, hitchhiked across the country, ended up in Thailand. Once I got to the other side of Canada and came back and worked odd jobs while I was trying to figure out what was going to be next. Because for so many of us, even though the thing that you were doing is gone, there's still that that void of, well, who am I in the face of this world, and how do I show up? And so I really thought that entrepreneurship was that answer, but I didn't know how to do it. So I ended up in Peru, and I bought this pair of underwear from a street vendor, and I thought, well, this is better than any of the shit my mom ever bought me. And I came home with this idea that I was going to start an underwear line. And it was literally that crazy. Like, it was, there's the underwear in my mind. I'm going to start an underwear line. And next thing you know, I'm standing on stage and on national TV pitching this idea to 5 dragons. They call it the Dragon's Den, and absolutely getting torn to shreds, Michael.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. I've watched the episode, and it's quite cool. But yeah, let's take us back. So you're at a night market in Peru, and you bought some underwear, and all of a sudden you put them on. You thought, oh my God, these are something I've never experienced before. They didn't chafe. And then you went back to your apartment in British Columbia on the dining room, and you co-founded Naked. So for those who don't know, what is Naked, the company, in 2008, and what happened next?
So Naked, what I tried to do was I tried to make a pair of underwear that felt like you couldn't feel it. Hence the name Naked. It was so comfortable you couldn't feel it. The irony of it was because I didn't know how to make underwear, and I wasn't like sitting there sewing the underwear myself. We had factories and stuff like that. But because I didn't know what I was doing, I was able to get some love money investors into the company before I'd even made any product. And when I shipped them the product after I'd made the first batch, and I'd used all of their money, like $100,000, and at the time that seemed like a lot of money. And I get a call, and one of the investors says to me, I know why you call it Naked. It's like, because it falls off when you wear it. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And it was like the way I had designed it with all the elasticity, it literally just shot off guys' bodies. And I had spent $100,000. I didn't even check it. And so as soon as I began, I was reeling in the survival mode. But we got a second chance. And, investors said, okay, you've learned a very painful and expensive lesson. And it was painful. It took sort of 5 years to undo. But eventually the company, we made great men's underwear, women's underwear, sleepwear, loungewear. It was in every major department store in the United States. We moved to New York. We raised over $20 million and partnered with, celebrities, NBA superstar Dwayne Wade. And eventually we were bought by a company in Australia called Bendon Lingerie. And Bendon is more New Zealand than it is Australia, but that was in 2018, and that was the end of that ride for me. 10 years of something I never expected I'd have.
That's awesome. I've got 2 questions for you I want to unpack, and thank you for sharing the story. Number one is, when you first had the idea that you wanted to create an underwear line, what was the first thing, and I know your partner Alex as well, you can talk about him, but was it, let's get straight to funding? So, or like, do we make a pair first? Like, what was the stage of getting that first initial funding? How did you do it? Like, what was the process behind that, if you can remember that going back?
I remember it vividly. I think we all remember our very first fundraise. If you've ever done it, it's so like, you have to have so much humility because you're just getting rejected all the time, right? And some people are nice about it, and it's like asking out every girl at the party and nobody's saying yes. Like, it's that kind of thing, but you just got to keep doing it. And that's what it was like for me. I was working so I had eventually created one prototype, one package. And at this time, I didn't know anything about creating a capitalization table, financials, projections, market comparables. I didn't know any of that stuff, right? It was pure blue sky idea, right? There's a hole in the men's underwear business. I'm going to fill that hole with Naked underwear. But I didn't actually know what that equated to from a dollars and cents standpoint. But a lot of people just loved the name so much. And I'd maxed out 2 credit cards to buy that name off of somebody who owned it. So now I own this trademark. I have no business. I have 1 pair of underwear, and I'm just out there. I'm working at a newspaper selling ads. And I literally bring this pair of underwear to me because in my head, I think, well, if these people own businesses, they must have some cash. I'm selling them ads for the newspaper. And so I would literally, at the end of my ad sales pitch, I'd bring out the underwear and I'd pitch them on that. And I actually got a handful of my investors came through that. And so I started with money first before I launched into inventory. And everything was fake it, right? Like I ended up going to the number, you guys have David Jones in Australia. We have Holt Renfrew here. And I ended up flying out to Holt Renfrew and just literally camping out until they gave me, the time of day for a meeting and getting the product in there. But today I do it a lot differently. I wouldn't start with that much love money. I think love money is really dangerous. It's not a bad thing, but I lost a lot of people. Well, I shouldn't say in that deal. I have lost people's who I love's money in companies, and that never feels good, right? Because not every company works, and I'm very hesitant to go down that road. And so, now today, you probably know all this, Michael. There's so many different mechanisms to finance a company, and more importantly, prove out your concept. Because I wouldn't even waste my time today with a concept that I didn't think had market viability and had already proved that to some degree. Because there's so many more entrepreneurs creating products. You can be an Amazon entrepreneur. You can be a TikTok entrepreneur. You can be, your products on Shopify. The barrier to entry of anything is incredibly low, but it's exponentially harder to scale because there's so many players in the field. When I was doing it, it was still the buyers controlled at stores. They controlled the outcome of your fate initially, right? This is pre-selling stuff online. And so, it's like dip your toe in the water with an idea. If something nibbles, go a little further. And so that's how I always advise entrepreneurs today. They always ask me, should I go raise the money? I'm like, no, go prove your concept. And then maybe go raise some love money. But even VCs and angel investors are so inundated with opportunity that they're very selective these days. And it's an incredibly competitive space. We just went through an angel, I guess you could say an angel circuit, if you will. And I mean, you start at the top of a funnel with 500 companies. And even to be able to pitch those angels, you have to go through 3 or 4 levels of pitch competitions. It's time consuming and it's expensive. So you really got to have, know that there's something there.
Yeah, thanks for, totally makes sense. And some of the things I got from there was proof of concept. If you don't have proof of concept, you might be a great salesman and you might be good in, pitching to investors, but it's not what you say, it's what you can prove. And at the end of the day, proving is bigger than what you can say. I want you to sort of tell us a story about how when you and Travis appeared on CBC's Dragon's Den and then followed that up with a second chance episode. What was that experience like and, getting all that exposure on TV in the early days?
Yeah, I will asterisk what I just said before with, if you're just passionate about what you want to do, well, then it's a lifestyle business. It's not I need to scale this with investor money. But if you're trying to scale something, then you really do need to prove it out. And, again, a cart before the horse is always, I'm always the type of person who jumps in without asking a lot of questions. And that was Dragon's Den. They heard because my aunt worked for CBC as a sales rep, she had mentioned it. And they called right away, and it's like, I'm sweating my ass off in my car because I wasn't expecting it. It's like, it's like 30 degrees outside. I'm in my car doing this interview, and the producer's essentially pretending to be the dragon, running me through the ropes and saying like, well, what about this? What about this? And I'm just like, pulling answers out of the orifices, the deepest orifices in my body. And at the end, she's like, yes, you can come on stage, but you need to take your clothes off. And I'm like, what? And she's like, well, It's TV at the end of the day. I'm like, so you're saying everything I just pitched you, I have to do naked on television? And so that's what ended up happening was we ended up going there, and there's like this X on the center of the stage, and you're not allowed to leave the X. And so we go there and we stand, and we got this idea, and we're like, let's just get naked, and we take off our clothes and we're wearing the underwear, and models come out, and it's all laughs and giggles and everyone's happy until they ask us what, how many sales we've done, and the answer is 0. And I get called delusional, that I have no clue. And honestly, he was right, but I wasn't afraid. The interesting difference, courage is like, when you have courage, you're facing an enemy you already know. And so the first time I was just arrogant, and I was like, I'm going to rock it. And I got my ass handed to me. The second time I was terrified because I know what I'd gone through the first time. And we had sales, and we actually got an offer, but the offer that we were given, we'd already talked to our shareholders, and they had said no to that offer. If this offer comes through, which they had said 50% of the business for $250,000, which was probably reasonable. And our answer was 30%. And that was the farthest our investors would go. So I knew I couldn't make another deal, but man, on that second chance show, I just wanted to say yes, just to have that like moment, where it's like, oh, we're all shaking hands and hugging, and then deal with the consequences later of having done a deal I can't do.
Yeah, you're lucky you probably didn't do that, because it all worked out in the end. What I want you to unpack for me, talk about the thought process on partnering with Carol in 2014 and getting someone on board to be the CEO and COO. What was that like, and how did that all transpire?
Yeah, Carol was just an industry legend. I mean, if you're in the lingerie sleepwear industry, you know who Carol Hockman is. And are you familiar with imposter syndrome, Michael?
Oh, of course. Yeah, we all go through it every day. Yeah.
Right. I have maybe a different take on it now these days, but then not only was I suffering with feeling like an imposter in the company, where I've got millions of dollars that I've raised, thousands of shareholders. I'm a publicly traded company. And so I don't know how to do any of that. I'm learning it on the fly, but I also am still learning the apparel industry on the fly. And so not only did I feel like an imposter, but a part of me deep in my gut said, you owe it to your shareholders to find somebody who knows what they're doing to run this company. You've taken their money. You've already lost it a couple of times. Not lost it as in they'd sold their stock and lost out. Just, the product that fell off was a waste of all the first tranche of financing. And so I felt very torn, because you're giving up control of something you care deeply about in that situation. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And having done it, what took about a year and a half to find her specifically. She wasn't the first door I knocked on. She's not a door, but the first place I went. And so about a year and a half later, we finally crossed paths and got this deal done. And then I felt really good about it, but I struggled immensely. And I loved her dearly, and I was very grateful to have her leading the company, but I struggled immensely being in the company and not running the company, and having to let go of decision making, and all those different things. I mean, she was a gem because I was a nightmare. I was a nightmare. We had just had a kid and a second kid, and we were young parents, and we had to move to New York, which is exciting and great. But you've uprooted your wife from her support network and yourself, and now you're in a new company. And I floundered. Like, I would be a lie to say anything else. I was not my best self. And I look back and say, she was a very patient person to deal with me through all of that.
Yeah. And talk about the going public on the NASDAQ, and what was that experience like for yourself? That would have been a great day.
Yeah. I will always say that they are great days. They're like, it's like taking drugs. Like, not that I'm condoning it, but it's a hit of massive dopamine. But in reality, everything leading up to it and everything immediately after it was a chaotic nightmare. Dotting the I's, crossing the T's. There's a huge list of compliance measures that you have to meet to go public on the NASDAQ. And in the 11th hour, you find out, well, one thing's fallen out of the sink. Like just a brief story that I didn't put in the book was that you have to keep your stock price at a certain level for a 10-day period prior to an uplisting. And if it goes below that period, or that price, your 10 days resets, right? So shareholders who are unhappy or want to liquidate their stock for whatever reason know that you have to maintain a certain price threshold. So the selling pressure starts coming in as we come into that 10-day window, that look back period, where we're having to find hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of the millions we've raised. We're having to find on a daily, hourly, minute-to-minute basis up until that market closes every single day, hundreds of thousands of dollars in buying to come in to support the selling, because they just want to sit on that bid and try and, if the price is $4, they're going to try and bid at $3.99 because they know you're going to come and try and take it and then, walk it up again. So it was incredibly stressful. I got so sick afterwards. But it was a magical moment, and I did feel, really proud of that journey. Unfortunately, the company, I said afterwards, this happens a lot of the time. After you uplist or you IPO, the market comes out a little bit beneath you, and you start having to battle depreciation and what you thought the company was valued at versus what the market is. But that said, I have come to. Originally, I hated it. I hated being public, and I hated the whole thing because it was just so painful. But in hindsight, and now I really see the capital markets as a fantastic tool to finance even small businesses, which is sort of counterintuitive because they're more costly. But when it comes to really when you're a public company, for those of your listeners who may be faced with this consideration. There's a lot of Aussie companies and European companies who want to list on the junior markets, not just the NASDAQ. And you have two currencies. You have the cash in your bank account, and you have the currency of the stock that you hold. And that extra currency provides so many more mechanisms to finance a company initially and ongoing. So I have found in certain private companies that I've, either been a founder of or just been a part of, your road to financing is very singular. There's only almost singular. There's only a certain amount of ways, and there's a lot of gatekeepers. But in the public markets, there's so many different ways that I really encourage companies to look at it with open eyes and as a tool to do something you may not otherwise be able to do in the private sector.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think a lot of people take some value out of that as well. I want to fast forward quite a bit because I want to get up to sort of what you're doing now and sort of some of your stuff. So fast forward to sort of 2018, you merged with the Australian company as well. Talk just to touch on that. What was that like? And did you end up exiting the company, or are you still involved, or how does it work?
They are an electric car company now. Again, I talk about, I hope I'm not geeking out too much on capital markets for you, Michael, am I? No. So Bendon Lingerie bought us, and it was done in a reverse merger where we're the company on NASDAQ. They're the bigger company, but they take us out and we disappear. We're gone, right? And so that was a bit hard to swallow because they actually sold Naked almost instantly after they bought it. My thing. Now they owned Heidi Klum, Stella McCartney, Elle McPherson, and a bunch of namesake brands in Australia. So it wasn't. They just didn't actually end up seeing any value in Naked underwear. They saw value in our NASDAQ listing. Right. So we go back to saying, what's the the currency. Well, the currency for them was the listing, right? Because that enabled them to have access to the capital markets and stock to acquire bigger brands than we were. But I at that point was so exhausted of it that I didn't mind. They asked me to consult for a year. Unfortunately, during that year, Naked lost over $250 million of value in the capital markets, mostly due to selling off of stock positions and just a bunch of false starts. Because if you don't know how these markets work, they'll punish you for it, right? I know it's kind of contradictory to the sales pitch I just made for utilizing the markets, but there's also a very big difference between the full-blown NASDAQ and the junior markets that I was referring to. So anyway, so I am now a consultant to the company I founded that has been acquired, whilst over the course of a year, we lose $250 million in value, and every single phone call I get is a nasty one. Every single email I get is a nasty one. Nobody's at fault here. Everyone's working their asses off trying to make this thing go, and we just can't get ahead of ourselves. So at the bottom of that market, I sold. And what was at many points, worth seven figures, in terms of my stock position, by the time I sold, was worth $2,000. So it was not the deal that made me, a wealthy man. It was the deal that made me wealthy in knowledge and experience and connections. And that was okay. What's interesting was when I was launching the book. So I'm very loosely involved at Naked at this time. And when I'm launching the book, did you follow, Michael, or did you see any of like the Wall Street Bets stuff with GameStop and all of that? Or
I a little bit of it, but no, I'm not. I don't have the acumen enough to talk deeply about it, but I know of it. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So essentially, what happens is all these Reddit traders in these message boards decide to pick a bunch of stocks that they're going to go screw Wall Street on and force. And these are heavily shorted stocks, right? So they're going to squeeze the shorts out of these stocks. And Naked is like 70 or 80% shorted at this point, right? Because it's just had such a disastrous run and it's hanging on by the thread of threads. And because it gets roped into this GameStop saga and Wall Street Bets versus Wall Street, the thing takes off like a rocket ship and goes up to $500 million in value, Naked, as I'm launching the book. And I'm getting phone calls from CNN, New York Times, all wanting me to opine on this. And I'm like, I'm not involved in the company anymore. And they're like, well, can you just like reflect on it from the outside? And I'm like, well, no, because it would be completely unethical and unprofessional of me to do that. But it was exciting and it was painful to watch that happen side by side, the book launch, when the two things like look like they're connected.
Is it after you sold the stocks or before?
After. The Wall Street thing was after I sold my stocks.
So you had no hat in the ring. You had no hat in the ring, economically speaking.
None. And honestly, Michael, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because they had raised $250 million. So it was diluted even further. And anyway, long story short, they ended up selling all the assets out of Naked. So no underwear, period. And it just got reverse merged into an electric car company. So there you have it. There's the capital markets for you in a nutshell.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I didn't know that we're going to get on that path. But what is that electric car company now, by the way, anyway? What's it called?
I think it's called Centro Electric. I think that's what it's called.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it.
I mean, yeah, like, again, there's a whole tutorial we could do on, why that was a good thing for them, why they did what they had to do. So
let's talk about the book. Is it called Getting Naked? Is that correct? Yep.
It is, sir.
What year did it come out? And Yeah, talk a little bit about what happened after the book came out.
But Getting Naked came out in January of 2020. January 2020, I think, or 21. I can't even remember. The last 2 years that we've been through as a human race are a bit of a blur. But that had been a 10-year project. And the thing got rewritten 4 times, from start to scratch. Really, the message, of the book for me was that entrepreneurship is a journey of self-discovery. And you use the experiences that you have, the challenges, the hard times, just the terrible days as ways of becoming a better version of yourself, really stripping away the bad in yourself, the reactionary, the anger, the things that are causing you anxiety, and using it to look in the mirror and get back to your real authentic self and what really matters in life. And that was sort of the double entendre of Getting Naked for me, was building this company naked, but the journey of coming back to who I was. And that one for me was, I almost lost my marriage in the company, as is not an uncommon story for entrepreneurs. And I almost lost myself in the sickness and in the bad habits that I developed, very unhealthy, not just drinking, but you just flex so close to the sun sometimes, living in New York or anywhere as sort of this seemingly high flying entrepreneur that you think you are, and how fleeting all of that is. And then realizing that all of it didn't matter. And that realization came to me, sadly, through the death of one of my best friends, who had 2 girls, similar ages to my 2 girls. And I was in Texas at the time on a trip when I found out that he had passed, and he had a heart condition. It was unexpected, but it was not, I think he knew more about what was going on for him than anybody else did. He'd never even told me he had a heart condition. Didn't know him for 15 years. And it was just shattered me. And I knew I needed to build my foundation in loving relationships and presence, not constantly in the pursuit of notoriety, being seen in the eyes of others, money, and all that different stuff. And this is pre-selling naked, right? This is sort of happening along the way. So that's really what the book becomes, is it becomes more about that personal journey you're on as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's a touching story. And for those who haven't read the book, I tell you to go out there and buy it and read it. It's a fantastic tale. I want to sort of talk about your documentary filmmaking and traveling with your wife and 2 kids as well. Where did you go? Is the documentary out that you created? I sort of couldn't really find it too much. You want to talk about that?
Couldn't really find it. Fortunately, it's not out, so that's why you couldn't find it. But if it was out, then that would have been.
Oh God, I feel like an idiot. Oh my God, where is it?
No, it's all good, man. There's this continuation. I don't know how you feel about this, Michael. I don't know much about you. I know you have, successful podcasts, and I love your website and your ability you're a fantastic interviewer. But I don't know if you've ever seen in your life where the dots connect in different ways than maybe or you thought they would. And Steve Jobs talks about this, but they always connect. And this film for me was one of those things where I had actually, after going to Thailand and when I was in Peru, I was filming a documentary with my brother. And we went from Mexico all the way down to Chile. And then my brother felt like the project was quite disingenuous, and it was sort of taking him out of the traveling itself, because he was always filming and stuff like that. And so that project just kind of disappeared. And I never wanted to let it go. And Cam, who I mentioned, my friend who had passed away, he was an avid traveler. And when he passed, my wife and I said, we need to take our kids traveling. And just life's short, who knows? right? Look, I'd been in hospital twice because of naked burning me out. And so we just decided that we were going to do this trip, but we decided to film it and dedicate it to Cam. And it was sort of a pickup from what my brother and I had done. And the world at the time, we started filming in 2016 again. And, you go on the news and it talks about the year of fear and terrorist attacks in Paris and Spain and Istanbul and all these different things. And we're like, part of it was, well, are we going to teach our kids that the world is scary? And, we should look at everybody like, with an eye of doubt and fear, or open arms of love. And so that became the message. It took a long time to do because of all that was going on with Naked, but we ended up going to Beirut, Vietnam, Colombia, Argentina, the Yukon, which is up north and like way up north in Canada, and Taiwan. And we just finished it last year, or sorry, not last year, right when the pandemic began is when we finished. It's done editing, and I just signed, as of the recording of this, a shopping agreement. So it is now going out to be shopped to studios and networks, of which I have no idea what will happen. Maybe you won't be able to find it ever, but that's it in a nutshell.
I think we'll get it on Netflix. We'll try to pitch Netflix and get it on there.
Fingers crossed, dude.
right up next to the Kanye documentary that I'm watching at the moment, which is quite cool. Can you talk about your personal experiences and breakthroughs that you've had with psychedelics, plant medicines, and sweat lodges? I wouldn't mind picking your brain a little bit about that, and I appreciate you opening up about your burnouts. And as an entrepreneur myself, recently went through a mental burnout myself and realized that, hey, it's what for? So I want to know your personal experiences with some of those breakthroughs that you've had.
Yeah, I love to hear about that too. I mean, I don't know how much time we have, Michael. I know I was late getting here, but I'm always fascinated to hear how people deal with when they hit the B word. And that's not the billion, that's the burnout.
That comes with the billion as well.
Oh yeah. Because most people don't do anything, right? Or can't feel like they can't, at least. So I mentioned that my wife and I had really hit a tough spot for a whole variety of reasons, and a whole bunch of, bad behaviors, bad choices, bad, just badness. And the path to healing anything starts when you recognize there's an awareness to recognizing that you don't like your situation, and then understanding what's the behavior that's you're doing you don't like, but then what's the underlying emotion that's causing you to react that way, to create this outcome that you're not enjoying in your life. And then once you understand that emotion, you have to ask yourself the question, why is it there? A lot of people, this just stems back to childhood trauma, traumatic events or events that created trauma in the body, right? And, behaviors that we learned and never got rid of because we never processed that trauma correctly. And it ends up rearing its head later in life. My desire to be seen, to be liked, to be successful, it's just classic issues of self-worth. And where do those issues of self-worth come from? They come from parents who at the time, struggled with self-worth and then projected those onto us that, there was value in achievement, value in being a good runner. And so, we all, and trauma is such a personal thing. Nobody's trauma is better than anyone else's. Someone might have been sexually abused, and someone might have just been bullied, and someone might have been bullied, and someone might have had a parent just force them to do too many public speaking competitions, right? You cannot compare any of those traumas because we all hold them individually. And so I had passed through I don't like how I'm behaving. I don't like the decisions I've made. and I can kind of see where they're coming from, but I don't know how to deal with them, how to dislodge them from my body, from my mind, to face them with empathy, not judgment, to face them with love, not shame and guilt. And I'd heard about plant medicine. And I've always been an explorer of everything. And so, despite the fact that they were illegal, from what I could see, something that was 5,000, 10,000 years old, been used for, for that long in our history as humanity, couldn't possibly be, that bad if done in the right environment. So I began with my wife, both together and separately. We embarked on a path to taking ayahuasca, which is an incredibly healing, powerful plant medicine. But before we didn't just hop into it. Like, we were, through some friends, we found a shaman that we wanted to work with. And we actually met with that shaman multiple times, even before we took any plant medicine, just so that they could understand what was going on for us and what might come up. And, we did breath work. We did the sweat lodge. We did things to just help prepare our bodies and minds for what would happen. We even started with a smaller dose of psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms. And it became this sort of 3-year journey. And I can get into what happened on those individual experiences if you want me to. I'm very happy to share. But before, what I'll say is, on the outside of it, there's always like a halo of like a month where you feel great. But if you don't integrate the lessons, and by, that I mean, if you weren't ready to integrate the lessons that you learned on that journey, then often, after a month or so, you're just kind of mostly back to where you were, and you're feeling the itch to do another ceremony. And then the ceremony just becomes the vice or the crutch, or like the finger pointing to the moon, where you're mistaking the healing, the moon, being for the finger, the plant medicine that's pointing to it, right? And so I had to be really careful about that, and so because you hear about these people in the Silicon Valley do ayahuasca every 2 weeks, right? And that may not be a bad thing for them. I'm not judging them, but all I'm saying is that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for, how do I heal what's in me? And what it did. So when I was, I'll tell you, so the psilocybin was very much focused on my wife and I, and, the shaman, she literally made us sit face to face, like real close, Michael. And this is at some point, probably 2 hours into having taken it. So we've done some individual work, and she's making us look at each other in the eyes without breaking contact, and just share, because when you're in the medicine of psilocybin, your heart is just open, right? The ego is lifting. So you're not holding on to the things that you're worried about or trying to protect or trying to guard against. And so you almost can't help but let it flow. And these are some hard things, and we're sitting there, and the rest of the people in this medicine journey are sitting around us. So we're in the middle with the shaman, and then there's this circle of support around us. And we're just bawling our eyes out, and we're just talking about the things that, we wish we'd said, we'd wish we'd done differently, and all the feelings associated with that. And then it was very, very hard. And then afterwards we kind of went back and just lied down. And then after the whole ceremony, days a week after, we did discuss it, but it was so releasing that the piece had been dislodged, and we created this ability to just talk to each other more openly going forward ever since. That doesn't mean things don't come up. Now, the ayahuasca experience, Ayahuasca is a bit deeper. That would be what we did on psilocybin would be very hard to duplicate in ayahuasca. You're in a pitch black room. Your eyes are very sensitive to light. And so you're on your own. And in fact, they had separated us because they didn't want us interfering with each other's experiences. And if in psilocybin, you can kind of come in and out of the experience where you're in, the work is very deep, you feel completely dislodged, you open your eyes and you feel a degree of normal, varying degree of normal, where you're aware of your surroundings. You can have a conversation like we did. In ayahuasca, that doesn't happen. You are down, down, down the rabbit hole. And in ayahuasca, I ended up, a lot of stuff happened, but I ended up visiting my daughter in the womb, which was an incredibly tough time in my life because Naked was struggling, and I had said I didn't want to have a daughter. Not daughter. I had said I didn't want to have children, and obviously that was very traumatic. We were pregnant. We were having a kid, right? Because I was so selfishly interested in my own success that I thought anything would derail me from that. And of course, as soon as the baby's born, you love the child and you go on. But I went back to that very moment. I don't know if it's just a memory. I don't know if I was literally there. I'm not professing some sort of space-time continuum traveling. But I talked to her in the womb, and I apologized, and I told her how much I wanted her and how much I loved her. And again, coming out of that, I didn't know that was an issue I was holding on to. I had no idea. And it was just, other things happened too, Michael, but it was just so healing for me to do that. And so that's how I look at these medicines. I think that they're gifts. I hope for more regulation. It's coming very fast in the States, at least. I don't know about down under. Canada's sort of a bit behind the States, but because it just again, in a safe environment with the right practitioner, it just allows you to separate the thing that's saying, I can't face that because that makes me feel bad, and making me feel bad isn't good. That sort of survival egoic kick in. It just removes it, and you just go and you face it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those personal experiences and letting us understand a little bit deeper into the plant medicine. The way I see it, like I'm a massive fan of the Matrix movie. Always have, always will be. I think the latest one was fantastic. What it does with psychedelics or just plant medicine or any type of natural medicine, in especially Western culture, it takes away the programming for a moment, and we get to see behind the veil, which is just code. Okay, we see the real code, which is source. So it's getting back to our source, and then integrating those lessons. As you said, I took a lot of notes when you were talking. It's integrating those lessons into your daily life on dropping the ego, and it's you can see why it's been not banned, but why it's been sort of shadow banned a little bit in Western cultures, because it does drop the matrix. I don't know if I'm right, but for me, it sounds right and it feels right to me.
It sounds like a great podcast. You should start a second one totally on this theme.
Yeah, and all those points, I've actually never had psychedelics before, which, it's not the right time for me, but I know in the future I will. And I like the idea of sweat lodges as well. You talk about sweat lodges. I'm a massive sauna fan, so don't have a lot of time at the moment, but I can see myself definitely spending a lot more time in sweat lodges.
I'll just give you one quick thing. It is unbelievably different in terms of the heat level of a sweat lodge. I thought I was going to die.
And some people have, and there's some people I'm well aware of who are famous sort of spiritual gurus and masters who have had a lot of trouble because some people have died on their watch, and I'm not going to name names, but anyway, we probably know who they are. Just to wrap up, we're sort of running over time, but talk us about what you're doing now. I know you're talk a little bit about farm life. What's that like with the family?
Yeah, Michael, so part of that whole healing journey that we went on, which we're still on, nobody is off of it. You're always kind of touching it and dealing with it. We decided, the city life wasn't for us. We wanted to be closer to nature on a daily basis, slow down. So we moved out to a farm about an hour and a half out of the city, have chickens and a garden. And it's for us, it is working. And it's sort of leading us in all these new directions. How I approach businesses is very different, but I'm working on specifically, I do a lot of consultation with startups now that I'm working on 5 or 6 of those, but my passion seems to be moving more towards television. After that first film was complete, I wasn't sure I'd ever do another one. And I've just finished shooting a pilot for a series called Finding Nowhere, which is about rewilding ourselves and going back into nature and learning how to hunt and fish and forage and grow and build. And by no means do I envision I'll live in nature full time, but this project is sort of an exploration of that inside the province of BC.
Something's happening where I'm watching Meat Eater while I'm watching breakfast. For no reason, I'm just watching another man hunt in the wild because something's gravitating me towards that as well. So we are going through a cultural shift. There's an energy, there's a feeling, people have labeled it many different things. But I think what we realize is that we need to get back to nature and we need to incorporate that into our lifestyle. And I think that's a massive thing for mental health, physical health, and just overall. We live in nature. We're not living with nature. We live in nature. So nature is number one. We're number two, because when we're gone, nature's always going to be around. Just last before we wrap up, talk to us a little bit about your travel clothing company, Kosan. Is it how's that? Is it still going? Are you still running that? Or yeah.
Kosan is a going concern, if you will. I say that tongue in cheek. I'm fighting for its survival. It had a tough 2 years during the pandemic being a travel clothing company. We had a killer Kickstarter. We did $1 million in 30 days. Really found that proof of concept to kind of bring this back to where we started. But during the pandemic, we made all kinds of decisions, pausing the business, focusing on personal protective equipment like masks. And I don't think looking back, we should have paused it or we should have put our dollars elsewhere, but who are we supposed to know? Right. And so, we obviously watch very closely as let's get endemic here. Let's start traveling again, just because I think the morale around how people view us would be better. And so it's been tough, but it's there. And we make really cool travel dresses if that's what that's what you need to travel in. So thanks for, yeah.
No, business is a bet, and you can have a win, you can have a loss, but at the end of the day, business is a bet, it's a risk, but you wouldn't do it any other way. Joel, I want to thank you for sort of being on the Best Book Bits podcast and opening up your story and sharing with us the amazing journey you've had so far, and I'm sure you've got a lot more journeys and tales to tell in the future as well. And definitely, I want to see you on Netflix with your documentary and obviously your pilot as well. Get on TV. I think that's the next thing for you, and if I'm ever down your way as well, I'll go hunting with you. And so
come hunt and do the farm when you come to Vancouver, baby.
Definitely. No, it's on the bucket list. Definitely. I'll be spending some time in the northern sort of hemisphere in the future. So Joel, thank you for being on the Best Book Bit podcast. For my audience, go out there, follow this man. What's the best place they can sort of follow your travels and reach you socially?
Yeah, joelprimus.com is where I blog. And then on Instagram, joel.primus is where all of it lives. The film, the book, the travels, the businesses, it's all there.
Done. Perfect. All right, Joel. Well, thanks for being a great guest and enjoy the rest of your days on the farm. All right. I'll speak to you soon.
You too, mate.
Done. Okay.